In India, along with brick, stone and mortar, one of the earliest materials used in buildings appears to have been wood. But little has survived the passage of time and rigors of the climate. Hello and welcome to our show. I am Sneha Gupta. In today's episode of Building Blocks of Bharat, we will explore the evocative wooden Havelis in Gujarat, the Kath-khuni work in the hills of Himachal and the woodwork in Padmanabhapuram Palace in Kerala. Keep watching, it's going to be quite a journey.
To oversee how wood was used to create architectural marvels, we journey to the very southern tip of India, through the verdant green expanses of Kerala and Tamil Nadu to the Malabar area. Our destination is exquisite, the Padmanabhapuram Palace. One of the old palaces in Kerala and once the residence of the royal family of Travancore. This area is now incorporated into the state of Tamil Nadu. However, all buildings in this palace precinct except the royal stone oratory were constructed of wood in the West Coast style of Kerala. Padmanabhapuram means a city born from a lotus flower, and the structures within the Padmanabhapuram Palace are dated around 1400 to 1500 CE. The palace is one of the oldest, largest and best preserved example representative of traditional wooden architecture in India. The palace has been built according to the rules of the traditional building code, the Taku Shastra, which means the science of Taku or carpentry. This is a unique system of traditional timber architecture that evolved out of the religious and astrological principles in Kerala. For example, it advocates building with locally available material. And so, this structure is made from locally available wood with a little laterite, a locally available building stone, which was used very minimally for plinths and for a few select walls. The palace has an intriguing blueprint. It takes us through a series of courtyards that works as links between the public spaces on the periphery to the more private spaces in the core. Before exploring wooden structures in more detail, let us look at the advantages and disadvantages of working with wood.
See, if you look at the structure of the wood under a microscope, it's such a fascinating thing because looking at those tracheids, vessels, fibers, the strong cells, we call these fiber cells as. So they give a lot of properties to this wood. They make it very tough but flexible. They make it strong but easy to work at. So all these elements are biological things and these are subject to degradation, natural degradation over a period of time. It can catch fire easily because it's a combustible material. Because it's a biological material and insects can invade, termites can spoil it over a period of time. So that is one important factor.
Understanding the structure of wood will give us a perspective on these structures. The wood is made up of xylem and phloem tissues. Xylem helps transport the water while phloem conducts food through the plant. The phloem, which can be found just inside the bark, is a softer tissue. There is another layer called cambium. Older xylem forms the darker grained wood known as heartwood, while the younger, more active xylem is lighter in color and found closer to the bark. It is known as sapwood. Wood is divided into two distinct kinds called hardwood and softwood. Though confusingly, the names don't always refer to its actual hardness or softness. Hardwoods are the ones that come from broad-leaved deciduous trees. They are not necessarily harder. They are the most commonly found trees in India, like sal and teak, that make up much of the timber used in the country. Softwoods, on the other hand, is the term used for conifers. In India, we usually find these restricted to the Himalaya and include such species as pine and deodar. Let's get back to the palace. As we walk through, we arrive at the center of the complex, the Thai Kottaram, literally the generic mother palace. This is a double-storied traditional Naluketu, which means a house with a central courtyard, with rooms on all four sides. It has a mortar-less chiseled granite base, timber superstructure and steeply sloping timber roof covered with terracotta roof tiles. All the other spaces are organized around this. There are separate halls for audience and gatherings, a large dance hall, feeding halls of various sizes, kitchen, residences for the king and other dignitaries, weapon store and bath houses. The imposing Padipura or main gate displays exquisite woodwork and leads to the Paumukham or the main reception with traditional gabled entrance and ornamentations. The wooden ceilings and carved granite pillars with floriated corbels are samples of excellent craftsmanship. The Mantrashala or the council chamber on the first floor of the reception hall has features like wooden louvers to admit air and light that helps maintain a pleasant temperature indoors. Another interesting structure in the complex is the four-storied Uprika Mallika, or King's Restroom, constructed in the 1740s. This includes the treasury chamber on the first floor, Maharaja's resting room on the second floor, and the revered prayer room on the third floor, the walls of which are replete with traditional mural artwork, so specific to Kerala. The Tekke Kottaram, literally the palace in the south, has elaborately carved wooden pillars, door beams and ceilings. The carved doors and pillars, the arching wooden grills along the veranda, the exquisitely carved brackets supporting the veranda, the large bay window called the Ambari Mukhapu or the howdah-shaped window are some of the unique features of the palace. Let us explore the techniques that created all of this. So how does wood work as a building material? If you look at some freshly cut wood under a microscope, you'll see it's made up of cells, like any other plant. There are parallel strands of cellulose fibers along with amorphous structure of hemicellulose. And these are held together by a lignin binder. Broadly speaking, cellulose is the fibrous bulk of a tree, while lignin is the adhesive that holds the fibers together. These long chains of fibers make the wood exceptionally strong. They resist stress and spread the load over the length of the board. Furthermore, cellulose is tougher than lignin. It's easier to split a board with the grain separating the lignin than it is to break it across the grain separating the cellulose fibers. So, physically wood is strong and stiff, but compared to a material like steel, it's also light and flexible.
The composition of these biomolecules varies from species to species, but basic there will be a plant material which is rich in lignin. There will be some timber material which has more of cellulose. So the composition varies from species to species, and it is this composition which tells us what use we should put the wood to. For example, there are certain species which you can use for paper making. Then there are certain species which you can only use for fabricating material in the boards. You cannot directly use them for construction. You take small slivers out of these and fabricate them in the boards and then use them.
Let us move towards our next location in Gujarat. We are driving through Gujarat to reach a small village called Vaso. Vaso is not a particularly famous spot, but we are heading there since it is home to unusual, intricately carved wooden Havelis. They showcase an ancient tradition of woodwork for which very little evidence remains, since so many old wooden structures have vanished over time. There are elaborate manuals, even poetry, that was written about constructing houses in wood all through the Middle Ages, especially the 13th and 14th century. Let us explore one of these Havelis in detail. A typical Haveli of Gujarat has a central place called Chowk or the open court, from which many rooms open and where the household gathers. A room for grain storage protected the family from the hazards of famine and drought. The utlo or front veranda is also common. Another classic feature in these Havelis are engraved brackets and carvings over the facades, many adorned with wooden sculptures of flying apsaras and mythical animals. Even the struts generally have filigree-like work, while the doorways are the works of art.
So we explored the technique of wooden architecture. We have to discuss more, but on the other side of this break. Welcome back after the break. Let's start exploring different woodworks.
The woodwork of Gujarat, both in quality and quantity, is very rich. Curiously though, wood was not a locally available material and was always imported into Gujarat from different timber-producing regions. This was largely due to its enterprising business community, which was able to source material both through sea and land trade. Another use of wood is also in the handles of many of these tools. This is because wood is light, has durability as well as certain degree of resilience to absorb the shock of repeated blows. So the Gujarati craftsmen worked wood into various components of the building. The columns, ceilings, struts, doors, windows, balconies and beams, all transformed into veritable works of art. Having explored all this, it's interesting to see the properties of wood that make all of this possible. When we look at metals, plastics and ceramics, they tend to have a fairly uniform inner structure and that makes them isotropic. They behave exactly the same in all the directions, whereas wood is anisotropic, which means a lump of wood has different properties in different directions. That's not just important to someone chopping the wood in woodshed. It also matters when you are using wood in construction. Traditional wooden buildings are supported by huge vertical poles that transmit forces down into the ground along their length parallel to the grain. That's a good way to use wood because it generally has high compressive strength. Not all woods are the same. However, many oaks have much higher tensile strength than many other woods, which is why it was traditionally used to make heavy beams in old buildings. Now we are going to take a quick detour away from the wood to examine a few other structures in India which are made from stone but look uncannily like wood. Let's take a look at one example. The Barabar Caves, which are located around 20 to 25 kilometers north of Gaya, Bihar. They comprise of numerous temples constructed from black granite stones. What makes these unusual is that these caves were carved to look like wood from a distance. How was this done? The craftsmanship of the time must have learned to mimic the texture, grain and structure of wood using stone. They crafted living rock to imitate timbered wood. Quite remarkable, right? We end our journey winding through the beautiful mountain paths of the Himachal Pradesh. The slopes of those mountains are rich in conifers such as deodar, pine and cypress. Almost 64% of the land is covered with forests, and so these trees become a key ingredient for the beautiful architecture in this area. Deodar wood is also very durable and is insect-proof, which makes it a good building material. The architectural technique used in this area is known as Kath-khuni. It uses a mix of deodar and slate, a locally available stone. And across the area, in the mountain houses, palaces and temples, the interplay of wood and stone becomes almost an art form. In the Kath-khuni buildings in Himachal, each building is erected on a plinth of stone that gives the building a heavy foundation. The walls alternate layers of wood and stone with an infill of rubble to close gaps. There is no mortar used to cement all this together. Gravity is the glue that holds the building together. A big benefit of this dry masonry is the flexibility of the stacking, which allows walls to adjust to the foundation. Since the sides of the stone slope slightly inward, any ground movement locks the structure more tightly together. This is important in earthquakes when the building must move with the shifting ground. This becomes very relevant since this area is also earthquake prone. Often, as the construction proceeds vertically, the stone decreases, until ultimately the structural wall consists of wood frames stacked atop each other. The building is capped by a roof of slate shingles, each nailed to the wooden framework at a single pivot point. Most of the buildings are a couple of stories high. The lower stories are used for cattle and the higher stories for living purposes. The upper stories often have cantilevered balconies. These have wooden supports that rest on the wall. Himachal's extreme climate means that local building has to conserve heat and disperse snow. Hence the small doors and windows, extended balconies and steep sloped roofs of vernacular structures.
Wood is an insulator, so you are kind of protected inside an environment. Even if there is thunder, lightning, it won't conduct the current. It's a good insulating material. Then it's one material which resists the temperature fluctuations. So it doesn't get heated up like your tiles and marble during summers. It doesn't get that cold also during winters.
What is interesting about Kath-khuni construction is that it requires neither highly skilled builders nor specialized tools. It can also be built in stages depending on access to materials, labor and weather. If one looks at the layout of a typical village in this area, usually the temple lies in the center or at the highest point. The temples are similarly constructed as the homes, but usually taller. The walls here too have patterned timber and stone pattern topped up with a slate roof. Let us visit one temple in this region to see how it is built. The 4-story wooden temple stands in the midst of a sacred cedar forest, near the town of Dhungri at the verdant foot of the Himalayas. It is believed that Hidimba, the temple deity, was one of the wives of Bhim, one of the 5 Pandava brothers in the Indian epic Mahabharat. The temple was constructed in 1553 by Maharaja Bahadur Singh. This temple is rather unusual architecturally. It is about 24 meters tall and consists of 3 square roofs clad in timber tiles, surmounted by a cone-shaped 4th roof that is covered in brass. The base of the temple is made of whitewashed, mud-covered stonework. The main doorway includes an elaborately carved wooden entrance that is believed to be over 400 years old. These and other carvings center on the goddess Durga, who is a mainstay of the pan-Indian stories. However, the goddess herself is represented only once in 3-inch tall brass image. It is fascinating exploring the architecture of this area. The aesthetic is so beautiful that the colors of building almost merge with the landscape. Draped along the contours of the mountains, they almost seem to be organically grow out of the countryside. The wood and stone come together to create an expression that epitomizes the land and its people.
So we have travelled through Gujarat, Himachal and the southern tip of India in our search for the most wondrous wood architecture our country has to offer. Let these moments, images and flavors sip in before our next journey in search of the connect between science and architecture. So don't forget to share your suggestion on feedback@indiascience.in. Take care, good day.